This is Homefront. We're here on Xbox 360. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. And I thought we would start by showing off the type of game this is. And yeah, it's kind of like advertisements, the video game. It's really quite funny. So we're starting with the multiplayer where we have to do private match because the online servers are gone, and kind of defeats the purpose of the game in general by not having online because the campaign itself is only like literally a few hours or under, like literally 3 hours long. And yeah, it's kind of funny that they weren't able to keep the servers going considering this was so clearly funded by product placement everywhere in the game. It's in the campaign too, all over the place, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I was like, oh, we should take a look at the multiplayer maps and see what they would have felt like. This actually feels like pretty good flow for like a multiplayer level, honestly. But I was like, it would be so funny if there was like advertisement just everywhere. And there is. there, there absolutely is. See, they're getting their bang for their buck all these years later, even with me doing video stuff on this. So it's 576p uncapped at up to 60 FPS. Yeah, it screen tears like crazy too, but it's just kind of, it's sort of funny because of like the blatant product placement here, which is so hilarious. I would have loved to have basically been around playing multiplayer when this was out. I kind of morbidly want them to remaster this game so that we can play the multiplayer again and just kind of have this game touched up. I'm wondering, I'm actually, you know what? I'm assuming the reason we don't have backwards compatibility on this is probably the advertisements. I would imagine is probably the actual thing that prevents this one from being backwards compatible. I would actually kind of guess is the advertisements in it probably don't want to be associated with this. Is this frozen? I can't tell if this is just not working. Okay, we'll just go home. Like, I just, again, the whole element of this is just kind of comical. I just wanted to start the game by doing that because I thought it was hilarious that that was the case. Because we're coming off of like me literally just having finished streaming the campaign and the story, and like I said, it's literally 3 hours, so it's super short, like incredibly short, even for games of like that era, if that makes sense. THQ, how I miss you, Chaos Studios, you poor souls. But yeah, for like literally, you could probably, if I was rushing because I was trying to get the achievements for not like dying on every level, I think you could probably finish this whole thing in literally like well under 3 hours if you were really kind of pushing towards it. And yeah, it's just kind of like a very TigerDirect.com. It's just like a really weird kind of level. Oh, we can actually choose into the gas station. Let's do this from this checkpoint. It's kind of funny. They actually have like little bits here, and then they've got these cutscenes that sort of tell the story of like the game, and it's like, okay, you gotta watch out because the Koreans have taken over America, and this story. Okay, there we go. We can finally get into it. So here we are, spawning right in front of White Castle. So what happens is, if you're not familiar with the Homefront series, like I've played the Homefront: The Revolution, which came after this, and basically America has some issues because there's a big gas kind of crisis where all like the gas stuff gets all blown up, and then there's like a big like bird. I think it's a bird flu or some kind of like pandemic type. I think it's a bird flu is what it is, was at the beginning of this. And like a lot of people die, and then like the government just kind of like collapses and everything falls apart, and in like the span of like a decade, all of this, and like at the same time that this is happening, Korea, like their leader died, and you know the kid that really didn't do much or of anything so thus far in real life, because we're now actually at the point where this game story-wise kind of takes place. Like we're actually, where did you come from? We're actually at that point in history where this game is supposed to take place, like roughly around there. And it's just kind of funny because it's like Korea got unified, and then because the Americans sort of didn't have the money and stuff, they like left, and Japan got like annexed and taken over, and then the Koreans started expanding, and then they like, I guess, do a big, like they occupy San Francisco, and then they also basically are like in the Midwest doing like they do like a paratrooper kind of attack, and just like the States in basically the span of a decade has become this, you know, desolate, sad, completely falling apart country. And it's just like it's a little silly, and the game actually really genuinely feels like a bit of a comedy at times, just because like the product placement and like the way that the story kind of works. Like it feels like a lot of the story is kind of missing. It's like hitting the beats of the narrative, but it never really dives into things. So like you're basically going from like one segment of like shooter, and then you're doing some kind of like sensationalist trauma moment or something like that, like just whoa, this is you know, I can't believe this happened moment. And there's like no consistency in how they treat like certain moments and morale things, and then the next portion of it you're seeing an ad. So it's kind of like in-game ad, which you think this game would be more properly taken care of considering how much money they should have been making off of the in-game advertisements, which are kind of funny. Because like, what's that? Oh, it's Full Throttle energy drink. I think there's one for like NOS too somewhere. It's just kind of like ridiculous, the amount of advertising. Like I don't mind, I guess it adds realism to the world, but it is just like, it's humorous. You get what I mean? Like it's just kind of like funny seeing this type of stuff everywhere. And yeah, so you're going from ad, random shooting, trauma, sensational moment, or you know, something like that, where it's like a shock and awe moment, and then like it just repeats, and it's kind of funny, and it's several levels, and like I said, under 3 hours. It's just kind of like a quick in and out shooter. Like it's not. See, here's the thing: is it's not like terrible, but at the same time, it very much is kind of like terrible. Like even upon reflection, like back in the day, this, I think I even looked at it. It was like it was poorly received and everything like that, because the campaign, there's nothing really to it. It's like bare bones. And like for like a neat nostalgia thing, it's kind of fascinating, but like there's not really anything to this. Like you finish it fast and you're just done. Like if the multiplayer was still here and people were actually playing it, or you could have bots or something like that, that would actually make this kind of neat. But like it's just sort of like there's a lot of stalling moments too. It's just, there's nothing like the idea. This is where one of those games where the concept is better than the execution has ever been for these titles. Like Homefront the Revolution as well. When I played it when it came out on the Xbox One, was just terrible. Like this game too. Terrible performance, screen tearing, the game like sort of freezes up at times. Like it doesn't crash or anything like that, it all plays, but it just feels like there's these massive chunks from a narrative perspective in that are just completely missing gameplay perspective wise. It's just like, it's sort of really weird and kind of random. Oh, and there's collectibles. There's like 61 newspapers to find if you look for them. I guess they're sort of all over the place. And then there's this weird obsession that this game has with you climbing up on things. It's hilarious because there's a point towards the end of the game too where they literally like call out the fact that like you keep falling out of buildings and stuff. It's like, wow, you sure fall out of towers and keep surviving. It's hilarious because I think it counted like 7 towers you enter and like 3 or 4 of them fall. Like it's comical. Like this right here, it's funny. And this is like the slowest fall I've ever seen in a video game. It's so awkward. Because, like, you can definitely tell, like, the developers were like, okay, we're doing Call of Duty, and we're doing it kind of late. We're not innovating, but we're going to throw this idea behind it, and the shock value is what's going to do this. It was probably THQ telling the developers to do that, honestly. Because it's also, like, it's really, like, wonky to, like, play and shoot and move. It's just, like, yeah, it's just not like a great feeling kind of shooter and stuff like that, but there's like a good selection of guns. From what I looked at in the multiplayer settings for like custom classes, there's actually some pretty solid like choices there, and yeah, honestly, I kind of regret not like having played this when it came out, because I think the multiplayer actually probably would have been something right up my alley. And it would have been really cool to have footage of that sitting around, too, from something. And I think that's the biggest disappointment, especially with games with online multiplayer that was sort of, like, potentially neat. Like, I always say about, like, I've always wanted to do some BioShock 2 multiplayer footage and stuff, and it's just impossible to find people. But, like, that's kind of the thing, is, like, you know, I sort of... I like some of the elements of things, and it's just like a bit of a disappointment where you sit there and like, this multiplayer probably would have been pretty cool. I doubt anyone would still be playing it at this point. But yeah, I kind of wish they would remaster this. The only problem would be, I don't think people would get enough value. Like, I don't think there's enough value for this to actually be a remastered effort. You know what I mean? Unless you like renewed interest with like the sponsors and stuff, be like, hey, we're doing like a throwback thing. But like I said, I think that actually is probably the reasoning why this one isn't backwards compatible on Xbox. Because like, it's still for sale and stuff like that on like Steam and other places. And, you know, I think that's the holdup. Like, I was kind of like, oh, is it technical? Is it like a music thing? The music stuff, it's like covers and stuff. Like, I've turned off the music because there's, you know, copyright stuff, but they're cover songs of popular songs, so I don't think that would be the holdup from a thing. But I'm wondering if it's the advertising. It's either those songs or it's the advertisement that's the problem for this one not being backwards compatible. I also don't think this game is really necessarily like worth that much to people too. That's a big problem. But wow, I would really love to play multiplayer, and this would be so neat, because it's a fine kind of COD clone, honestly. It is a fine COD clone. And it would be kind of neat, because it's supposed to have some larger scale stuff too, I think for like 16 players. Obviously not really doable anymore. But like, the idea, like I said, the ideas here, I think are okay. Like, shock value, that was the word I was looking for, shock value moments. And, like, I don't mind the characters and the world and stuff. Actually, a pretty diverse cast, too, for the era. But, like, it's just so light, right? Like, this is... And there's lots of little buggy things and, you know, like, polishing issues in the world. But for something that came out sort of late into the 360 era, it's just sort of perplexing as to, like, why this didn't have more meat on the bone. I'm thinking, because like, THQ, I think, was in some really bad financial problem. Like, they were definitely having like crazy financial issues at the time. Like, this I think this was like kind of where they were just sort of falling apart. Why would you run up here from a safe place over there? Well, I guess maybe that's not safe, it's just in the open. But like, yeah, the thing with the baby is kind of funny, because it's just like, oh, pacify that child and stuff. It's kind of hilarious, honestly. Anyways, like I was saying, so this is like when THQ, because THQ died, and then another company kind of bought all the stuff, and then like relabeled themselves with like a THQ branding, and then I think it's still around. I think it's like THQ Nordic is what it's considered now, under Embracer's various wings, and they own different things and swap IP between the companies, and that's the thing that I just find really interesting, is like they were actually kind of a cool publisher. They had interesting stuff, and it just sort of sucks that they had so many financial pitfalls and eventually just vanished, right? That's the big thing. They essentially just disappeared, which is to me a shame because, you know, less gaming publishers is not, you know, a great thing, as to say, because they were a juggernaut for quite a while in the gaming industry. But yeah, they're gone now, I suppose, anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it was just kind of interesting to see, like, the fall of things, and I am wondering if that maybe was a problem for this game, is just, like, a lack of, like, budget. Because, like, if you take this concept and you'd have to basically, this animation's hilarious, you'd have to, like, reboot it at this point, because there was Homefront the Revolution, and that one also was really poorly received, and that was deserving as well, because that game was, oh wow, that was abysmal at the launch of the Xbox, or with its launch on Xbox One when I played it at the time. That was rough. But, like, I think there is something interesting with the idea. I mean, we got it with, was it Red Dawn as a movie? I think the writer of this was also the person that did Red Dawn or whatever. So, like, the idea of America getting, like, invaded and stuff is interesting. It being, I guess you would say, Korea is kind of silly. But, like, at the same time, I guess it's sort of, you know, one of the few countries you can actually do that with, because other countries get mad if you put them in that kind of a situation, or you get what I mean? Like, you can always do Russia, but does that even work anymore? I don't know. It's just, yeah. The Korea thing, I guess, is because Korea was acting all tough, and, you know, maybe them unifying could be a thing, but still, the idea of that actually being an actuality, you gotta really, like, you gotta stretch stuff. Like, I'm Canadian, so, like, I don't have, like, a thing in the race where I'm like, oh, mighty America would never fall, and all that stuff. But, like, it's, the more and more I get older, too, the more and more I sit there and I'm kind of like, how plausible are these scenarios? And I just, like, I sit there, especially when I was, like, streaming this, and I was just, like, really easily able to kind of, like, poke holes in, like, the narrative. Like, okay, you know, Korea comes together. I still don't think they'd be able to annex other whole countries. I don't think that would fly on a global scale. I know we have lots of bad issues with appeasement in society, but, like, I don't know. I find that hard to believe. And especially if they went after, like, Japan or something, and some other Asian countries. China would not like that. I guess they're, like, they kind of work together, but China would prefer to have this stuff over them. And then there's, like, okay, so they create, like, a big issue where there's this huge economic, like, collapse and stuff in America, and it's like, okay. But then it's like, and then there's, like, oh, there's a big disease thing, alright. But it's still kind of, like, it's still hard to, like, actually get the idea across that there would be such, like, it's a decently sized country, but it's not, like, a massively sized country. And they would be able to, like, come in and actually, like, hold parts of the US, even with all these problems. I really kind of find that a little hard to believe from those perspectives. But, yeah, I mean, the idea is neat, and I think if you just overlook that kind of aspect and just be like, oh, you know, it's just a game where you go and you do shoot your stuff and you deal with the trauma of the shock and awe of all the, you know, America homeland being under attack and stuff. You just kind of believe the setting, you go along with it. It's not a bad sort of situation and stuff. And I just want to mention, I feel like the character size to the environment is off. Like, I feel like we're too close to the ground. It's super awkward throughout this game. I'm just putting it out there. It feels super awkward. But, like, yeah, if you kind of set aside that idea of, you know, the ridiculousness of, like, this scenario, and you just kind of embrace the world, this is the situation it is, and you just kind of, like, play the game. It's a few hour, maybe interesting to some sort of experience. It's just an easygoing shooter game. There's just not a lot of depth to it, as long as you sit there and you're like, you know, this is okay. This is fine for me. I'm not expecting anything too crazy. You go in, you shoot some stuff, you blast some things, you have a day, and you just kind of go about it. You know what? It's not a bad situation in that regard. But, you know, if you're really paying a lot or diving into this for an expensive thing, it's like it's not really worth that.